Hey guys, real quick before we get started, I want to give a giant, massive size thank you to Skater Landau, who sent me her very own PS4 to ensure this video could be made. Without her kindness, I wasn't going to be able to do PT any real justice, so if you end up enjoying what you see here, maybe stop by her YouTube channel and show her a little bit of love. Boxing up your own PS4 and mailing it across the country to a total stranger isn't exactly a small deal, and I'm just forever thankful that she did. And with that taken care of, let's see what this playable teaser is all about. You know, normally when I sit down to make one of these videos, it's a relatively mundane affair. All that's ever required of me is to get kind of analytical about what aspects of the game I liked and which ones I didn't. And when you think about it, that's kind of all this job entails. But what happens when the game I'm critiquing turns out to be less of a game and more of an interactive advertisement with a puzzle box attached to it? Man, I hope you guys are strapped in, because this is most definitely going to be our strangest trip to that town just off Toluca Lake. So I hope you've all prepared yourselves, and welcome to Silent Hills. You really can't talk about PT without at least discussing some of the events surrounding its release. It was a kind of perfect storm of situations that led to the creation of this playable teaser, and each little event plays a key role in the mere fact that this thing exists. First, and most obviously, you have the disillusion of Team Silent and the stagnation of the Silent Hill series as a whole. At this point, people were willing to do almost anything to get back into that familiar town, and at the same time, Hideo Kojima, a walking, talking Pandora's box of game development, was hard at work on a project that seemed very near and dear to his heart. And then we have what some might call the inciting catalyst. A little horror title by the name of PT shows up on the PSN, and without a recognizable series attached to it and a no-name company responsible for it, no one really batted an eye at first. To be honest, I'm not really sure who's responsible for first bringing this little title to the attention of the public at large, but it didn't take very long for streamers to get a hold of this thing, and once they did, the buzz was absolutely unavoidable. An indie horror game with more mystery than on-screen graphics was bound to turn at least a few heads, but people were genuinely taken back after trying PT out. First-time players noticed a very clear level of polish and what felt like real intent behind its creation. It was an enigma wrapped in a mystery, and the internet was eating it up. According to Kojima, the mystery that was PT was supposed to keep us scratching our heads for about a week, but never underestimate the combined power of bored people with an internet connection. Almost immediately, the gaming public at large started sharing notes and comparing experiences, leading to a relatively reliable way to get through this little puzzle box. And then one day we all got to see it for what it really was.
Oh my gosh! Oh my god! It is! It's Silent Hill!
Now, I'm sure there were others who got there first, but a clip from this live stream was the first video I remember circulating, and it showed that PT was not a demo from a no-name studio, but a sort of art house experiment in advertising a game without the use of traditional screenshots and trailers. Now, you might have noticed there's been a lot of non-PT game footage on screen so far, and the reason for that is there really isn't much of PT to show. It essentially is just an infinite loop of the same hallway, and instead of combat or really any kind of interactivity in progressing through the demo, we had to perform actions that just do not come as second nature to anyone who's been gaming since childhood. We had to wait, look, and listen to what was going on, some parts of the game requiring you to do actually nothing at all. Every little corner held some kind of clue or what was believed to be a clue, which made for a really interesting time, but we just had no idea what the mystery was. This wasn't like putting a puzzle together without ever looking at the printed side. We were essentially comparing pieces to find out whether or not there was even a puzzle in the first place. And I say we, but I think it's time to make a little confession. I had absolutely nothing to do with PT right up until I sat down to make this video. Yeah, I know, there goes the poser who claims to be a Silent Hill fan but still hasn't played what is essentially the most recent entry in the series. But trust me, I have an excuse. As a sort of rule, I typically stay away from non-combat first-person horror games, mostly because a legion of simpletons here on YouTube rode that genre like a race car right into massive amounts of undeserved success. What was that? Am I bitter? Of course not. I mean, sure, some of us content creators spend countless hours researching, writing, recording, and editing together entertaining and insightful analysis on the medium we love, while a handful of 19-year-olds made millions by screaming into a $50 Yeti snowball for maybe 5 hours a week. Nope, nothing to be salty about there. Now, what was I talking about before I started bitching about the talentless hacks who single-handedly created the worst era of YouTube to date? Oh yeah, that's right, PT. So the main point I was getting at is an ocean of streamers and Let's Players made this game about as appealing as a hammer smash face. So I didn't bother downloading PT while it was popular since I'd already seen the teaser it was made to reveal. Which may have brought up a few poignant questions in some of your heads. How the hell am I even playing this right now? After all, PT was taken off the PlayStation Network years ago, and essentially anyone who didn't have it then can't get their hands on it now. Although that's not quite as true as it used to be. Well, like I said before, a viewer let me borrow their very own PS4, and it was a really cool situation for two very distinct reasons. First, the fact that she trusted me with her PS4 put a smile on my face, but this was also my very first experience with PT. I had seen analysis videos, lore discussions, and had listened to all the industry rumors floating around at the time, and having taken in all that media, I just kind of figured there was no need to actually play the damn game for myself. After all, it's a short little affair, and I had seen a large chunk of it through other people's content. Well, let me be the first to tell you I was dead wrong. There really is something special going on here, something you might need to experience for yourself to really understand, and without a doubt the main reason for that is the thick and oppressive atmosphere to be found in this quaint little house. It's honestly so rich and pervasive you could cut it with a knife. Everything from your own footsteps to the creaking of the old floorboards are masterfully represented in the creepiest and most unnerving way possible. Sometimes while you're walking around you can swear you kind of sort of hear someone breathing over your shoulder. No joke, put a pair of headphones on and play through this. It's a damn religious experience as far as atmospheric horror is concerned. The gameplay, if you can even call it that in a more traditional sense, is centered around taking several laps around this infinitely repeating hallway, and each trip doing a very specific and seemingly arbitrary series of actions to trigger a slight change in the next hallway loop. And under normal circumstances, there would be more than a few complaints here, since most of these actions that need to be taken are so cryptic and convoluted that it took an army of people brute forcing PT to figure them out. Like I said earlier though, this isn't strictly speaking a video game, or at least it's not in any traditional sense that we're used to. And while I would normally be ranting and raving about how puzzle solutions should at least be hinted at in the actual games they're included in, we kinda have to approach this thing from a different angle. Going by what Kojima said, it was made to be nearly impossible to figure out, and if that was the goal, I'm gonna go ahead and declare PT a massive success in that department. I mean, there still isn't a consensus on how to trigger some of the ending events that lead to the teaser video, if that tells you anything. Although, while we're on the subject, I will say for those of you planning on tackling this thing, I'd recommend going with the method developed by The Great Debate, where you'll need to whisper the word Jareth into a mic connected to your PS4 controller at certain points during a haunting. In my experience, this method worked like 90% of the time, so definitely look it up if you're planning on playing this. Which actually brings me to a very interesting point. Without a doubt, I would not have been able to work my way through this thing on my own. Don't get me wrong, I like a good puzzle, but I'm not used to having to take 10 steps and then waiting to hear a baby's laugh and then whispering into my headset while a poltergeist appears behind me. Yeah, cryptic doesn't even begin to describe this experience. In any other scenario, this would have been a deal breaker for me without a doubt, but given the unique nature of PT, it kind of ends up as a positive. Really, when you break this all down, PT's quote-unquote core gameplay is less actual game and more of a challenge that we had to overcome before earning a chance to watch a teaser trailer, and that may sound a little reductive, but honestly it's not. I actually really appreciate how Kojima was taking a stab at shaking up how we consume games media, and if anyone was going to approach releasing a teaser in this kind of avant-garde way, it would definitely be him. Which puts me in an odd place. I can't really knock the game for its obvious flaws because given the context of the situation, those universal rules of game design sort of don't apply. You have to look at PT through a different lens than any other game. First and foremost, this is an experience. The atmosphere, the ghostly apparitions, and who could forget everyone's favorite good old Sync fetus, they're all here as a sort of barrier to entry. Sure, the gameplay loop had promise, but I doubt very much this is what Kojima had planned for Silent Hill. This was just a test you had to take to prove you were worthy of watching this reveal, so I can't exactly recommend you go out and play PT, but I really want to anyways. This constantly looping, cryptic first-person puzzle solving may not be to your taste, God knows it's not to mine, but there's this visceral experience waiting to be had here. The lighting, environment, implied lore, and sound effects all build this really cool foundation, a kind of immersive, creepy, self-contained world. One that I'd really like all of you to get a taste of, but sadly after Konami and Kojima's well-publicized public falling out, PT was snatched from the digital marketplace never to return. Finding an actual PS4 with PT installed on it can cost upwards of $600, and even then, who knows how long that hard drive will last. It seems like those of you who didn't get it before never will. Of course, that is unless some game dev wizard spent 9 months of their life painstakingly recreating PT inside the Unreal Engine, but who the hell's gonna do that? This guy, that's who. Unreal PT is exactly what it sounds like. It's a near exact copy of the PS4 game running inside the Unreal Engine and might be one of the most impressive things I've ever seen. This guy recreated all of the assets you see and compared them against the originals until he got them damn near perfect. Similar video filters are used, even though you can tell a little bit of a difference. It has the same frame rate, and he even mimicked the annoying little motion blur implementation that has objects coming into focus long after I fix my eyes on them. It plays nearly exactly like the PS4 original, and it's clear the goal here was a near psychotic level of accuracy, with the only real noticeable differences being slightly different movement, the font used in the game, and some alterations to make the final series of events much more reliable to trigger without the use of a mic. If you ask me, this is a great way to check PT out if you've never played it before, and since it's free, you really have nothing to lose. However, there is another option as far as PT on the PC goes. Indie game dev Artur Leksowski, hopefully I didn't just butcher that. Anyways, he has his own take on PT with what he calls PT emulation. Sadly, it's not technically available to the public anymore since he's recently shifted it behind his Patreon's $15 tier, a move that could have easily been a cash grab, but on one end, I think $15 for something like this isn't exactly a hard ask, and on the other, this may have been a way to ensure he isn't slammed with the cease and desist order from Konami, although now that I think about it, taking money for this would make it even worse, but that's besides the point. His crack at recreating PT in Windows is even more accurate than the Unreal version. On top of that, as far as visuals go, this is by far the most sharp and defined looking version of the game you can get your hands on, but all of that does come at a price. For some reason, no matter what graphics settings I used, I would get very choppy looking horizontal camera movement. At first I thought it was the mouse acceleration, but it showed up even when I was strafing, so maybe it just has to do with my monitor's refresh rate being higher than the 60 FPS this was made to run at. And since we're on the subject, this game looks amazing scaled up to my ultra-wide display, but all of the cutscenes and some of the transitions were clearly made for a 16:9 aspect ratio, which means the sides of my screen look like this during these scenes. Now, to be fair, this isn't really a complaint. I mean, this was a one-man affair, and I don't think support for 21:9 is a key feature that's needed to enjoy this emulation. I just thought I would mention it. And while I was writing this up, I kind of got to thinking, while this is called emulation, I don't really think he's running some kind of PS4 emulator underneath all this. More than anything, I'm pretty sure naming it that was supposed to show that this was a one-to-one recreation, but I could be wrong. Just like the Unreal version, the ending sequence has been altered in order to make it more consistent, but unlike the Unreal version, this build actually plays the ending teaser video when you beat it. The video may be compressed to hell and back, but it's there, making this the only real way to experience all of these events for yourself outside of a hacked PS4. If I had to recommend one of these options to go with, I'd say the latest build of PT emulation would be the most complete and accurate way to go, along with the best looking and functioning, but the fact that it's behind a paywall does take away from that recommendation slightly. The good news is neither version is a bad choice, so depending on what you're looking for, the Unreal build might take care of your PT fix with no issues. Sure, it might control worse than the original and have a slightly different look to it, but you wouldn't really know that unless you played the two back to back, so it really doesn't matter how you do it. All three options are going to yield nearly the same results. But more than my recommendation, what I was caught up in while writing this is the fact that the community did such an amazing job of stepping in and making PT playable for those of us who missed it the first time around. This playable teaser could have easily been lost to time, leaving only the OGs and the wealthy with access to it. But a few different people jumped into the fray and made it possible for us to enjoy this thing for years to come. It might be the negative coverage that the video game industry has had lately, but it's just oddly refreshing seeing people come together like this and bring what could have easily ended up as lost media to the masses. I don't know, that's just really cool to me. And as a really awesome bonus, if you visit Artur's site, you can grab a little program he whipped together that allows you to walk around in the map from PT's ending teaser. Really though, the most interesting thing about this little demo is how it was made. Apparently the ending teaser in PT was made in-engine and rendered in real time, which means Artur was able to essentially just dump all the assets from the official PT release and hand-stitch all those assets together, which is really damn interesting. It does a really great job at bringing across that Silent Hill feeling, which is interesting because I feel like it does a better job than the video itself. The apartments have lights on in them, which gives this eerie feeling as if there are signs that this place is both empty and filled with people at the same time. If you get close to some assets, it's clear that they haven't been textured, but the ones that have look really damn good. The implementation of the fog could use some tweaking, but not much honestly. It looks amazing the way it just kind of rolls in and actually obscures your vision in a really realistic way. Artur also has his own game coming out called Death of Rose, which he says is heavily inspired by PT, and the guy did work on an upcoming horror title called The Medium. So it seems clear this guy's putting his skills to good use, and I usually don't like the idea of putting stuff like the PT emulation behind a paywall, but I can appreciate the guy's gotta eat. So if you're interested in stuff like this and have 15 bucks to burn, it's definitely worth looking into. Alright, so we've covered all of the ways you could possibly get your hands on PT, but we haven't really broached the most important issue surrounding all this PT nonsense, or at least the most important one to me, and that's the fact that Hideo Kojima was looking to make a Silent Hill game. And to be brutally honest with you guys, I'm not as ecstatic about that notion as most other people seem to be. And before this gets off on the wrong foot, I want to say I am a massive Metal Gear fan and hold his earlier works like Snatcher and Police Knots in the highest regard. That being said, as a writer, Kojima could be described as a lot of things, but subtle is most certainly not one of them.
Ugh, will this even flush?
Most of Kojima's stories, as wildly entertaining as they are, often break down into a series of NPCs relaying information to the main character out loud as he repeats that same information back to them in the form of a question. And like I keep saying, I am a fan of his, but I think it's unrealistic to say that he's without flaws or limitations. Silent Hill requires a very light touch. You may want to fully explain the situation to the player at every turn, but the goal is for them to piece the story together themselves. Out of the 3 original SH titles, you'd be hard-pressed to find more than a handful of scenes where story elements are told to the player outright, and even less where the story being conveyed is actually true. You also have to consider that Silent Hill games show a certain level of restraint in their game design, and I don't think the guy who dreamed up a fight sequence where you fight multiple amphibious robots inside an even larger amphibious robot considers restraint to be much of a virtue. Based on the Silent Hills concept video that started floating around the internet, which I'll be honest and say I didn't even know existed until working on this video, I'd say that they were trekking pretty far off the traditional SH path, with more of an emphasis on the supernatural and a very Lovecraftian vibe, which actually kind of makes sense as Guillermo del Toro was signed onto the project and that guy put some kind of Cthulhu-esque tentacles in everything he works on. But having said all that, I am at a bit of a crossroads. After all, it's not like we're getting any other SH games, and for all I know, Kojima might have been able to deliver a kind of horror experience that would do the series justice. Sadly, we won't ever find that out, as Konami has proven time and time again that they're not willing to sell their properties to other studios outright. And as previous experience has taught us all, counting on Konami to create an SH title without farming it out to some unknown Western dev who doesn't really understand the series, that's a long wait for a train don't come. So we may never really find out if the guy had what it takes to write for such a prolific series, but as time goes on, I find myself growing more and more accepting of the idea. So here's hoping one day we get a chance for him to prove me dead wrong. And with that, we have sadly come to the very end of this amazing franchise. Silent Hill means a lot of things to a lot of people, but for me, it represents one of the most incredibly dark and meaningful stories ever told. Silent Hills 1, 2, and 3 are some of the absolute best horror experiences ever created, but more than that, they're examples of what happens when a group of outrageously creative people get together and create a game for no other reason than a love for that game. I'm not exaggerating when I say this series is passion and determination incarnate. And sadly, this world has proven that a spark this bright will always fade just a little quicker than you'd like. After the 3 original entries in the series, Konami began the slow process of tearing down everything that made it special, only to replace it with mass market appeal, on-screen button indicators, and dodge rolls. Looking at the newer Silent Hill games in order seems to show exactly what happens when a series loses its focus and starts to try to please everyone. And honestly, I don't think that's any one developer's fault. The fact of the matter is, Silent Hill was created to fuel subjective takes and wild fan theories. Because of this, it's no wonder there's next to no consensus on what it means to make a Silent Hill game. In my personal opinion, the only people who are capable of producing a true successor to the originals would be a team largely made up of the people responsible for creating those original games in the first place. And no, this isn't some kind of if it ain't Japanese, it ain't Silent Hill type of argument, although you could argue that a foreign, outside-looking-in perspective is what makes these games so interesting. No, the fact of the matter is, through a combination of subtlety, restraint, and ambiguity, Team Silent created a work of art that's nearly impossible to add to. And you know what? That's okay. Sure, the series may have taken a steep nosedive past the PS2 generation, but we did get some interesting ideas and a few really fun horror games out of the deal. And as I've talked about many times in the past, sometimes it's okay for a story to end. We had an awesome run, and maybe in a perfect world, Silent Hill would still be alive and thriving today, but it's finality that gives life meaning. To tell a fully realized story, you need a beginning, middle, and as much as it sucks to admit, an end. So maybe this isn't a lament for what could have been, but instead, an appreciation for what we have. I mean, really think about it. For a very brief moment there, those of us who enjoy this medium got a taste of real art. Not mass-produced design motifs masquerading as a video game, but an honest-to-goodness experience crafted with real love and care. Looking at the franchise like this, you kinda have to feel blessed that we had it in the first place. Besides, no one can really say what the future holds. Maybe one day we'll see a true successor to the SH name, or even a new entry in the series that not only lives up to its forefathers, but surpasses them. When or if that day ever comes, you can bet I'll be right here ready to cover it, but until then, I want to thank all of you from the bottom of my heart for coming along with me on this journey, and here's hoping I get just one more chance to see you all again, right here on the Silent Hill Retrospective. You know, I think I've had my fill of horror games here on Earth. Maybe it's time I start looking elsewhere.